Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome to Let's Create the Revolution Together, a podcast about creating new ways to embody ourselves as human. If you're here, you're probably well aware of all the shifts that are happening on our planet. Maybe you go with the flow with those changes, or maybe you're struggling to find who you truly are. Either way, this space right here is for you. My name is Marigold Era. I'm an Ayurvedic wellness coach, a spiritual life coach, and a podcaster. I am here to guide you through this reality that we can call the Earth School. I strongly believe that we are here to create new ways to show up as individual and as collective, and that every experience that we encounter is an opportunity to grow and evolve. So grab yourself something to drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's jump right into the next episode. Today I'm going to be by myself, which hasn't happened a lot on this podcast, but that will happen more in the future. Um, I wanted to take this week's episode to make like a review on what we've learned this month and how this podcast is evolving. So I'm just going to tell you the story of how the podcast started. So this podcast started after me trying to be a coach, become a coach for like 2 years. And I don't know, it just felt like it wasn't really aligned with who I am. But I was like in need of money. And so I was pushing this thing forward because I was like, well, I need to get the money coming in. So I need to be a coach. So I was pushing that and it wasn't working really. And I got into a free 3 weeks course that was called the CBA. And it was just an amazing free program. There was so much value in there. And I met all kinds of amazing people. And the more I was going into the program and the process of like rediscovering myself as a businesswoman, I was trying to figure out how to bring myself forward still as a coach. And in this program, there were like a lot of meditation and a lot of awareness that was introduced in the tools that they were giving us. They were bringing a lot of awareness, and that's where I realized that I kind of needed to start a podcast. I had this information coming onto me, and it was after we did a breathwork workshop in which something very intense happened to me, and it was all like in my throat chakra, and it felt like I was so restricted in this area. And I actually lost my voice after that workshop. I lost my voice for like almost 2 weeks, which was a big deal because the information I was getting from the workshop was like that I needed to bring my voice forward, and then I lost my voice. And it wasn't like totally lost, but it was like my voice was actually broken and it was hurting me when I was speaking. Um, so I went through that and I've learned so much. And at the end of my voice being just like hidden, that's where I realized that I actually needed to do that podcast. And so I just decided to post on Facebook, um, just a simple like question of just asking people in my network if they would be interested um, in participating in a podcast, if they were willing to share their voice and tell their story about being outside the mainstream box. And I had like a lot of responses, and and so I was like, all right, let's jump into it. Let's go. Let's ride this wave. Yeah, this is happening. And so I just opened my Calendly, link to all the people that were actually interested in that. And I didn't realize how many people were interested in that at the beginning. And so I got slammed very fast, and I was meeting like 3 to 4 people every day, six days a week for like almost 3 weeks. I got super exhausted, and but it was in a good sense, right? I was actually meeting all kinds of amazing people that had something to say, that wanted to see this world change. And that's how I feel. That's how I felt since I'm like 6, I always remember myself wanting things to change, to evolve, to see humans grow into something better, or more aligned, more in tune. And and so when all those people responded to this call that I made, um I don't know, it was just so amazing to meet all of those people, and to finally not feel so alone, in my path. And it just like confirmed that I was my voice was actually needed, and their voice were also needed into this world right now. We need to hear those stories. We need to hear the people that are shifting, that are transforming their reality, that are taking new path, that are creating something new from their heart space. And I don't know, it's just like this podcasting. It feels like I'm actually on the right spot in my life for the first time in so long. I never was someone that was into like career or like that kind of stuff, making money and like networking or like doing PR or whatever. I was always like putting my experience forward. Like that's where I put my values throughout my adult years. Since I was 20, I left the home that I grew in quite early in my life, and I wasn't trying to like get a degree, get a job. I was just trying to pile up as many experiences that as I could. And I remember people that were around me didn't understand what I was doing. They told me that I was irresponsible, that I wasn't finishing anything, that I was unable to make a commitment, that kind of stuff. And now, like, I'm almost 40, and I'm doing this podcast, and I've studied in so many areas. And I did study in journalism, psychosociology, special education, art history, and all kinds of other stuff. I have like a huge background of studies, and so I feel like this podcast is just like bringing all of that together, and so that I can give it to the world, to give back. Now it's time to give back. And a big part of my background in psychosociology, um, there was a lot of those moments where you just look back on the experience you went through so you can actually learn from them. And so I wanted to do that with the podcast. I want to come in every month after we met three wonderful people, and just like reflect on what we've learned so far in creating that revolution. And so yeah, that's what I want to do right now. That's how I feel. That's my intuition saying, like, this is part of my life. This is how I roll. This is how I do it in my personal life. Like, pretty much every month I will just like take a step back and look at what happened in the month, and reflect and take the lessons, move forward, that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to bring that forward into this podcast. All right, so let's start with Kris Hodkinson episode. So that episode was so special to me. I was doing a lot of pre-interview to just like gauge the people, see the vibe, feel the interaction between us. If the vibe was nice, if like I'm always trying to tune in into my intuition. This is how I make my decision. And so I was speaking with Kris, which was in the first one that actually reached out to me, and I was just amazed about a story. And usually my pre-interviews are around like a 30 minutes, so like I'm just gonna have like um just a very big picture, and then after that in the podcast we can actually go deeper, and I'm learning stuff that I don't know. But with Kris, what happened was, I don't know, it felt like the time was right. And he just started to tell me his story, and I just didn't look at the time. I had nothing else after him. And I was just listening. And the whole time I was thinking to myself, this is the podcast. This is it. Like this is the episode, like right there. Like let's go for it. And and I was just like questioning him and like trying to um, go deeper right there in this pre-interview. And I remember at the end of the interview, I was like, "Well, thank you, Kris. I think this is it. This is the interview." And he was like, "Oh, really?" I thought this was just like the pre-interview. Um, and so this is the first one that I've published, and I don't know. It felt like it was an achievement in so many level because I actually um followed my intuition right there on the spot. Like I could have been stuck trying to control this or trying to restrict his story, right? And to just like be there, like, I have just 30 minutes and we have to go over stuff. But I don't know, the moment just felt so right. Um, I just I just kept on recording, and it was just like on Google Meet, and it wasn't like, it didn't feel like I was like so professional, and like the image or how I was looking, or but I was like, you know what, let's just do it anyway. Let's just post this. It's not perfect, it's not like the sound isn't perfect, the image isn't perfect, but so what, right? We just like, the message was perfect. The message was exactly what we needed to hear at that moment. And I wasn't gonna try to change that. I was just like committed to post that, because that's what my intuition was telling me. And I remember when we actually recorded that, his group, he had a group, he still has it on Facebook, and his group was like around 100. I think he just celebrated his first 100, and he was like so excited, and I was excited for him because when you start, it's just amazing to see like those people coming into your universe and to just like keep them engaged. And right now, like we're like almost 2 months later, and now he has like 400 or almost 400. And so I'm just like amazed by the path that he's going through. And he's actually now meeting a lot of people doing those kind of podcasts where he meets people that are healer, that are like yeah, just like want to bring their medicine forward in the world. And so yeah, so I this one was very special to me. The other thing that was so great about that podcast for me personally was when Kris talked about the pandemic. And I remember for me at that moment was a moment of feeling lonely, alone, like separated, isolated, and not just in the physical world, but in the emotional world or the mental world. I don't know how to put it better than that. But the thing is, I didn't agree at that time with the pandemic. I didn't agree with the narrative. I didn't want to put too much energy into the fear of like that virus. That didn't feel right to me. And also like the rest of the world that I was in contact with that actually felt exactly like me, that didn't want to like have the job, or that didn't believe in the narrative that was pushed by the media. They felt so angry to me, and so like it wasn't like aligned with me either. And so I felt very lost. I felt like I didn't belong to either of those groups of people. And I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And well, that's a theme for me, and I can go back to that in another podcast. But it felt like that, so I met that in me. And then when Kris was speaking on the podcast about the COVID and the pandemic and the spiritual awakening that this moment brought, I was like, yes, this is how I felt. This is how I felt internally. And like when I was trying to speak my mind with the people that were not believing the narrative, they were kind of telling me that I was off, because they were more on the side of like, this is the government trying to control us, trying to like put stuff into our own body. And I just like, it was like, all right, and what's the positive side? Like we can always focus on the negative side of the things. And but I feel like it's not actually helping us to do that. And I wanted to just look at it in a more spiritual space. So to be against the government or the mandate, or like going in the streets and like manifest for something better. It felt for me very disempowering, because I, I was a little bit like that at the beginning, and I felt like it was draining all my energy into something that I needed to fight, instead of being aligned with something that I actually wanted to create, right? And so when he was speaking about going through this experience as a spiritual moment, and as something that was actually happening for us, to be by ourselves, to be questioning our ways of life, to be taken away from our daily jobs, that kind of stuff. and and to see it as an opportunity to just take a very honest look at our life, and face our fears of whatever it was. If I just felt like there was a lot of fear coming in, and that it was the perfect time to just address those fears. And so when we spoke about that with Kris, it was actually the first time for me that I actually met someone that was thinking kind of the same way than I did. And it felt like I wasn't alone anymore. And so I'm very grateful to have met Kris. And it just like brought a lot of peace to me in that experience that felt very like isolating and very lonely. And then the more I speak about that with my other guests, because there's a lot of guests that I've been through something at that time, right? And that this moment was a blessing for them as well, as an opportunity to learn about themselves, to learn and to shift stuff in your life. And so the more I'm opening up, and the more we talk about this, the more I'm discovering all kinds of new people that are actually thinking the same way. that have seen this pandemic as a blessing and as a spiritual moment in their lives. And so yeah, so I don't know if you're listening to this, Kris, but if you are, I want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. This episode was amazing. I've learned so much, and I feel like your story is just stranger than fiction, as you mentioned in the questionnaire that I asked you to answer at the beginning. And I loved it. It was very touching, entertaining. It was everything. So thanks a lot for sharing on my podcast. Yeah. All right. So what's next? The next one was Karmen Pent. And when I met Karmen, I was also in that moment where I was in that program. I don't remember if she was in the program, but it was around that time. So it was like May or something like that, May of this year. Um, and so she asked me a friend request on Facebook. The moment that I saw her picture, I was like, "Oh, that woman is interesting." And so I read a little bit about her bio before clicking confirm. And she called herself the She Dragon, and she was like um, telling people to ask her anything, and that she had the answer, and that she would be very happy to give it to them. And so at that moment, as I said, I was like questioning, and I should like still like push forward this coaching business. What should I do? I wasn't like all in with the podcast. And so I called her. We scheduled something together, and she just blew my mind. Everything she told me was just right on point, and I had so much fun with her. I thought we were just going to talk about for, I don't know, like 20 minutes, and then it ended up being like, I don't remember, something like an hour or an hour and a half. And so it was, yeah, it was very cool to meet her. And so when she raised her hand to participate on the podcast, I was like, hell yeah, yes. And um so at that point, like, I had something new in the podcast. So I had like subscribed to the StreamYard platform, and so I was using that. And so Carmen is the actual first one that was on the platform with me to record our episode. So that was very cool. And I knew that she had um, an epic story. I knew that she was from Ethiopia, Estonia. I knew that she was from Estonia, and I knew that she was actually living in the UK right now. So I knew that she wasn't in her country. She was like evolving into something different than her roots. And then we started to talk about the way she was raised, the way she was loved or lack of love. And so we talked a lot about that. And so I felt like this was the story. So when we got to the real podcast, I was like, let's talk about the transgenerational trauma. I feel like it's a big part of creating that revolution. um I feel like clearing our ancestral wounds is part of what we have to do for our kids and for ourselves as well, but for our kids, like, because we're breaking those cycles. And when we're breaking them, like, they don't have to go through it again. So that's amazing. And that's like pushing the revolution forward. And so we're her story. If you didn't listen to the episode, I'm inviting you dearly to listen to it, because it's quite this journey that she's been through. And and even though she is from a different space, a different place in the world, a different culture, um, it felt like I could relate to her story, because I also have, ancestral wounds. And I remember when I was in psychosociology, I did this talk, and it was just so amazing. And it was all about the transgenerational trauma. And I did a lot of research on my line, my generational line. And I interviewed my grandma, and I was like just asking her a lot of question about like the femininity and how it was experienced in that side of that family. And it resonated a lot with me. If, like the feminine side was more something that in my family we were experiencing in the private. We couldn't go outside with the gift of the feminine creativity. And so a lot of people in my line, a lot of women in my lines are creators. They're like designer, or like chef, or like they will like do those crazy cakes, that looks like something else, that taste amazing. They're gonna, like, yeah, like knit or draw or paint or write, or they're all like super highly creative. But their creativity is only for them and for their close family. So let's say I have someone that knits in my family. Well, they're not gonna try to sell those things. They're just gonna do those knitting to like the newborn, right? All right. And so, or like a person that is very very good with the cake. They're not like at cooking or whatever, like they're just gonna do it like for the birthdays, and they're not gonna bring cakes, like to Christmas, or to, it was just like specifically for the children. And and so that was something that I had to go over and to overcame, because I am also super creative. And now I'm bringing that forward in my podcast, and I want to show to the world, like this is what it means to be creative. It is something that is very dear to my heart. And and we're I'm just gonna plug this because it's gonna be so amazing. But we're gonna have a podcast eventually. I'm filming it this week, but it's gonna be posted a little later in down the game. But it's gonna be about how creativity affects the brain, and I feel like it's gonna be such a great episode, and I'm gonna keep you posted on that. So just stay tuned. But yeah, so with Carmen, I think it was very important in um, that mission of creating the revolution, to talk a little bit, to just like enter, the space of the transgenerational trauma, because I feel like it's something that we all need to address at one point in our lives. And I would really love to go deeper into this topic, because I feel like we still have so much to learn about it. The next one I did was Christina Ariana. This young woman, oh my God. She was in the first ones that I actually met and did the pre interview. I think she was the first one that I did the pre interview with. And I remember talking with her, and I was like, oh my God, this girl is so positive. Like, this is such a breath of fresh air. She is always looking on the bright side. She's like very light, very, fun. And so I was very interested in how she got there. And um yeah. And so we didn't really talk about her story in the pre-interview, but in the podcast, I was like, "Girl, we need to talk about your story. I don't know what brought you there, but we actually need to talk about that." And so she was like, "All right, let's go." I never really like tell that story, so let's go. And so I was actually surprised to hear about her coming from such a privileged way of living. And I think that we sometimes can have like judgment uh, um, on those people that are super privileged, that like she was saying that everything that she was like consuming was paid for by her parents, and like scholarship, and she didn't have to worry about anything material wise. And so it may feel like she had everything. She just had everything, right? She was like, her college was paid, she was in the sorority. And sometimes it's easy to judge those people, it's easy to just like say that, oh, it's easy, they're so privileged, and whatever, and I think we need to have this honest look at ourselves when we're going there, because uh, maybe we need to a little bit of jealousy there. um, so yeah, so I was very surprised when she was talking about her experience, and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know that, and I'm so glad, because um, everyone has a story, and everyone has something new to bring to the table. And I felt like it was very refreshing to meet someone that is um, that is from that kind of background, but still feels, internally, like she was still feeling that emptiness, or that like purpose less way of living. She felt like it wasn't, like she wasn't happy, even though she had everything, and quotes, like she didn't have everything. She was lacking something. She was lacking happiness, she was lacking passion, she was lacking like her true self. And and yeah, so it felt very cool to see her, to hear her path, like from what she called her zombie years to right now being like more and more aligned with who she is, bringing that forward with the feminine side, and how she is like putting herself out there. I think it's beautiful, and I feel like we should encourage those, that younger generation, because I feel like they're amazing. They're super creative. They're more in tune with who they are. I'm not saying all of them, of course. Like I'm not telling, like I'm not saying that everyone from the younger generation is super aware, super conscious. I'm just saying that I have a lot of feedback about those younger people being being more aware, maybe being more entrepreneur than we were, being more, wanting more to have a lifestyle that suits who they are. And I think it's pretty cool. I think we should honor that. Like I was looking to have that my whole life, and I see them running for it, and I'm like, yes, yes, people, let's do this thing, let's do this, let's open those doors, let's create like this shift of how we make money, let's create this shift of like questioning who we are, like at that young age, and like putting more awareness, and bringing who we are in our jobs, in the way we show up into the world, like let's do that, let's use our 20s to do that. That's amazing. I feel that's amazing. So I had a lot of fun with Christina. It was yes, it was just a very fun and inspiring story to tell. And the way she's telling those story, I feel like it's just like you just want to listen, right? So, and technically, like what I've changed at that moment was that I actually like created a background for the podcast. So there was like something there's always something new, a little bit, like, like we evolve a little bit more every week. And I feel like this is very cool. So that was like my evolution for that week. I actually put a background in my studio. So yeah. All right, so the next episode was with Velia Hernandez. This episode was very fun too. They're all super fun. I'm gonna just like say that to every one of those podcasts because they're just all amazing. All right, so if you have a pet, if you're like interested in animal in general, like this episode is definitely for you. And if you're not interested in that, well, that's okay. It's all right. Um, there's always something to learn in each stories, and this one for me was another very fun episode because well, I have pets. So first of all, I have a husky. She was a rescue, and my oldest daughter, she's 12, and she is all over rats. Okay, so she's got like pet rats, and she's been having them for the past like 4 years. Um, so we had so many of them, but there's always like at least three in the house. And when Velia reached out and I was looking at what she was doing and I was like, oh, this is very interesting, you know? So I feel like that revolution we're creating, it means to step forward with our gift. All right. And so Velia, you can go back and listen to her story. I mean, like her old story is very amazing, but it has to do with anxiety and 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 the relationship with the anxiety and the animals and how that plays off and like the impact we actually have on our animals and how they can also be like a mirror of who we are, and they can tell us stuff, right? Because they're living with us all the time. So and part of that revolution for me is to exist in this world with that thing that is not like the rest of the world. And so the way she is the way she's doing her work, I feel like it's just so cool. And I don't know if you've seen it, but if you didn't, you can go on her page. And we actually did a live together where she was actually communicating with my daughter's rats. And that's where I really saw the magic that she was bringing. I mean, the way she speaks about the what's her work, like you can see she has like a lot of passion for that. And I feel like moving forward into creating that revolution, we need that passion. We need to be like in tune with who we are, what we really love to do, and how we bring it forward. So in that live we did together, it was just amazing. My daughter was sitting right next to me in this room, and we were listening to her communicating with my daughter's raps, and she was on point with each and every one of them because they're all different. I don't know if you know like that kind of animals, but my daughter has three rats, and they're all like super different. They all have their personality, and they all have their special spot that they like in the cage or in on her body, you know. And Velia was nailing every one of them. Like she was like, this one's like that, this one is like that, this one is like that, and my daughter was like, her jaw just dropped to the floor and she was like, what the hell is going on? How does she do that? And my daughter was like, is she actually in the cage right now, you know? so so it was really mind-blowing to actually like witness someone talking with our animals and knowing them so deeply, like in their personality, without even like she never met them. She just saw pictures, and like I showed like short videos just because they were so hard to take on picture because they move a lot. um so she didn't know them, but she was just nailing every part. Like so it was very cool. And and meeting Velia was so amazing because as a parent, like it brought something to me as well, because the way she actually interacted with the animals brought something into my daughter, which was always in love with animals and used to ride horses, and she always wants to have like cats and dogs and whatever, like she wants to have all the animals. and so Velia, the way she was speaking with my daughter's rat, it just brought something back, because she kind of lost it, like her passion. Like she still has it, but it wasn't like that alive. And so talking with Velia, it just brought it back for her, and now they're actually working together. And Velia is actually like just teaching my daughter how to, you know, do that thing. And so that podcast brought her into our life. And I feel like it's such a blessing to have her right here in our life and in my daughter's life. So, so I had so much fun on so many levels doing that interview. All right. So the next one was Craig McMackin. Have you ever heard of him? If you haven't heard of him, please go watch that podcast. It was something else. It was something else. At that point, I was feeling more comfortable. Um, I was feeling more comfortable, like interviewing people and like the studio, and I was just like getting a hang of it a little bit more. And when I first met Craig, we had this great vibe together. It was like talking with an old friend. And so I was very excited, because when I heard his story, I was on the floor. I was like, man, this is amazing. Amazing. um, so if you haven't heard Craig's podcast, of course the links of all the podcasts that I'm talking about are going to be in the description down below, so you can always like go click on them. Mm. So Craig was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when he was very young, like almost like a newborn. And the doctors told him that he wasn't going to make it past 18 years. And that's a big news. That's huge news to have on your head as a kid, and for the parents as well. I mean, like, we haven't really talked about that, but as a parent, I for sure I have like so much empathy for his parent. And what is amazing about his story for me was how he just like stopped believing that narrative and focused on something else, and how his health is actually getting better every day at 37. And he just said, like, I'm not buying this thing anymore. And I don't know, his story is like a reminder of, you can do whatever you want. You just have to believe in it. So that's why I really love his story. The way he just like stood up for himself, got off this doctor's office, and did everything according to who he is. And so right now his health is very good, and I'm super pumped for him. This is amazing. And the other thing that was so cool was that in the pre-interview, Craig actually wrote a long, long text to explain a little bit of like his story. And so I was reading that text and I was like, this is very well written. And so I mentioned that to Craig, and I was like, have you thought of like reading it? And he was like, all right, let's go ahead and read that thing. And the way he delivered his story, the way he was reading that text, for me, it was just so cool. I would just wanted to support him in telling this story the way it felt very aligned with him. And it was so funny because I don't know exactly what happened, but somehow it was the first one with who I had a lot of technical issues. And so it got cold, and like I don't know, there was a train, you can hear it in the recording. I feel so awful about that. um there was like a lot of technical issue, and we were just like writing those issue. It turns out very good, and I remember at one point I think it had like a notification of something, I don't know, and we got off record, and I was just thinking, oh my God, this is a tech talk. This is a TED talk. This is a TED talk. You gotta just like go on that stage and like just read that story and just like share to the world how possible it is to live according to who we are, and without like buying um other people's expectation on what your life should look like, you know. So I had a lot of fun filming with him. We had so many great conversation, and it was the first. Well, in Villas, I did take a little more space, but in this one, if it was the first one that I was actually like putting myself a little bit forward more, you know. I was like trying, you know, I wanted to give him the stage because the story is was just very uh just awesome. But I also had like so many insights as he was speaking, right? So so it was very cool. The last one we did was the one with Alicia Marie. Alicia, we met in the CBA group that I was talking earlier about. And when I first saw her, it was on a coaching call in that group. And I don't know, her energy was just so fun. Okay, so her energy was just so fun, and she was just like very authentic, very like aware, and she was the kind of girl that wasn't taking any shit even from the universe, right? And so when she raised her hand um to be on the podcast, I was very very excited. I was like, oh yeah, this girl, like she's so like she's, I don't know, she's got this high energy, you know, high vibe, you know. So I was also very curious about her story. And so we talked a lot about addiction, alcoholism. I really enjoyed her story, and I relate. I still relate to that story a lot. Like, of course, we did not have the same story at all, like at all. But there are so many so many marks that I could just like raise my hand and say that happened to me as well. I also had my experience with addiction, and I know what it feels like to numb yourself. I know how it feels to just not even wanting to be in relationship with yourself, and choosing to numb yourself, to drink, to smoke, to pop a pill, anything, to have sex instead of looking at your life, instead of spending time with yourself, instead of looking at the lessons. And so I do relate a lot with that story. Even my grandfather on my mother's side also has struggled with alcoholism, and he went through so much in his life, and he kept on going without alcohol. And I've seen him going through a lot of hard stuff, and he just kept on going. And it was actually very inspiring for me to see him um, not go back to his old ways and turn to something that felt more aligned with who he is. And so when Alicia was sharing her story with with that kind of addiction, and how it just like spirals down, and you don't you're so much like in denial of who you are in those area, you know. um so I do relate to that a lot, and maybe I can talk about this um a little more in another podcast. And also, we had this great talk about parenting and how we show up for our kids and how we support them, no matter what, and how they can actually teach us so much stuff, and how they can bring so much light into our lives. So I really, really enjoyed that, because of course I relate to that, and the more we're gonna get to know each other, the more you're gonna understand how much motherhood is important for me, and how it's part of my passion to be there for my kids and to learn how to be a better human by being a great parent. And so this is such a big part of my life. And so when we got to talk about this, I felt light up. I was like, yeah, let's talk about this. And what I love about our conversation about parenting was like we had so many things in commons. And also, like, I'm an unschooling mother, and our kids is going to school, and I love to be able to speak with someone that is on the exterior doesn't have the same value, kind of, but in the interior, like in the intern world, we're having the same value. So it doesn't matter how it shows up. Like you can put your kids in school and still be aligned with who your kid is. And as she was saying, um, maybe my kid has something to bring forward into that system in this life. Maybe my kid is gonna change something in that system. Maybe it's just like in need to have like group, but as long as he's good with it, he's good. But when if and I remember she said, if he's like coming and knocking at my door saying, school doesn't make sense anymore, like we're gonna support that. And that's how I feel too about raising my kids. Like, yes, we chose unschooling, and if my kids come and knock at my door saying, unschooling doesn't work for me and I wish to go in the school system, I will be open to that. We must have that conversation, and support them and understand like what's going on. Like, is there something we can do? Is your decision made, and how we can support this decision, or how can we help you? Like, is it the right decision? Like, there's always like many angles we can explore when a kid um is struggling. So, and I really like that about our discussion. And we have so much other stuff that we've talked off record, and we're gonna have another podcast together about that, and I feel like it's gonna be super cool. And I'm not gonna spill the bean right now, but I'm gonna keep you posted for sure. So yeah, so let's wrap this up, okay? um, so far in Let's Create the Revolution Together, we've met so many cool people, that's for sure. And every one of them have something to bring forward. And I would really love to hear where you relate to those stories. Where do you feel like, yes, this spoke to me, or this I need to go there, or I need to think about that, or I am exactly like this, or like I would love to speak more about this. Like, I would really enjoy to have your comments and to engage, in a conversation with you guys, because I feel like, and I know that creating the revolution is not a one man show. We're all in this together, and I want to create. The more we're going, the more I understand that I want to create something that is more of a community, and a real one. a real one where people know each other, where people talk to each other, where people take care of each other, and where people support each other. And I feel like this is one way we're going to create this revolution, because we're not going to create this revolution sitting in our at our desk or on our couch trying to change stuff for ourselves without bringing it forward into the world and without reaching out to people. All right, so this is very important, and this is why I'm doing these podcasts. And so I want to hear you guys, and if you feel like you want to tell your story because you're there, right, you're at that moment where this is my time, I need to tell that story. So yeah, reach out to me. I would love to meet you for sure, and I would love to do a pre-interview with you, and we can talk about the possibility of working together, because I feel like, yeah, working together is actually part of that revolution and creating bonds with each other. And there's so much coming up. I have so much like to offer, and I have so many great ideas, and I feel like just this thing is going to be very cool to build, and I want you guys to be part of it for sure. So leave your comment, ask your question. You can also come in the group. We have a group on Facebook where you can come, and there's gonna be like some behind the scenes over there. Like there's gonna be like maybe some tea parties. Like there's gonna be a lot of stuff that's gonna be happening on that group, and I would love to invite you there. So if you feel called, please make a request. The group is simply called Let's Create the Revolution Together on Facebook, and let's talk. Let's create that revolution.